is Nate with another Backcountry beer review. Today I'm on top of a P1K, that's a peak of 1,000 feet or more of prominence in New Mexico. It is Mesa Gallina. It's about, I'd guess, 40 miles south or west-southwest of Albuquerque. It's got a beautiful view, really unique view because of its location. It's very remote and isolated from other peaks, so it's kind of a view of the area that I've never really seen before. It is, of course, lager summer. If you're new to my beer reviews, that means that during the summer months, the only types of beers I review are lager beers. Now, I have broken that rule once. My last beer review, my last lager summer beer review of 2021 was actually the Schneider Weizen Doppelbock. And I thought, well, it's a Doppelbock. That must mean that it's a lager, right? Because bocks are lagers. Well, I found out afterwards that actually the yeast that it's brewed with is a wheat beer derived yeast that is actually top fermenting and is more of an ale yeast than a lager yeast. So even though it was a Doppelbock, it was really not a lager. This beer, it might be number 2. I'll let you guys decide. You can sound off in the comments if you agree after I explain. First, let's actually introduce the beer. This beer is by Chile Line Brewing Company in Santa Fe, New Mexico. It is the Como Pica green chili beer. So Como Pica, Spanish for, it's kind of like Spanish slang for how spicy. Pica means pokey, kind of describes the way that spiciness feels when you consume it. This is a very unique beer. I actually have reviewed one Chile Line beer before. It was way early in doing these beer reviews. It was actually the Que Picante, which is also Spanish slang for how spicy. And that is basically the red chili counterpart to this green chili beer. Now, not only is it made with green chili, it is also a Rauchmarzen, which is basically, it means that it's smoked. It's made with beechwood smoked malts, and it's going to be in the Märzen style, which is kind of like it's sort of Oktoberfest style beer. A lot of Oktoberfest beers in the U.S. are typically Märzens. Let's see. Well, let's read the back of the can, and then I'll talk about why this beer is also special. It says, brewed with local green chili grown in Chimayo, New Mexico, fermented with Kveik yeast. The backbone of this beer is a Rauchmarzen, brewed 1 barrel at a time to ensure quality and freshness. Enjoy with pozole, chocolate cake, tamales, and of course, pizza. So you'll notice in there, they said it was fermented with Kveik yeast. Nowhere on the can does it say it's a lager or an ale. I actually read a New Mexico Darkside Brew Crew article recently where they interviewed the head brewer of Chile Line, or maybe it was the owner, I can't remember, or maybe they're the same person. And he was basically saying, look, we're brewing a lot of lager style beers with this Kveik yeast. And Kveik yeast is special because it brews bottom fermented like a lager, or ferments on the bottom like a lager. It gives off these lager characteristics, but it's still kind of like a farmhouse yeast. And because it's a farmhouse yeast, it can ferment at very high temperatures. And we're talking like 90 to 100 degrees. We're typically, and I'm not an expert at brewing beer, more drinking it. Typically you want a lager to be brewed at more like 45 to 55 degrees, obviously Fahrenheit. So Kveik is special because it gives you these lager characteristics with a bottom fermenting yeast that you can brew in like 3 days. And that's really important because with lagering, a lot of the barrier to entry for brewers, I think, making a lot of lager style beers is that they require that refrigeration, they require that special care to ensure that you're not brewing at too high of a temperature and ruining your beer, and you're preserving those crisp notes. So it's really interesting. I think this might be the first beer I've had that's made with Kveik yeast. And so you let me know if you think this counts as a lager, even though it was not cold fermented. Let's open it up and give it a taste. Time for a sip. Man, where do I begin with this one? The initial taste, I think it's bright and fruity. I get this almost like figgy, bright figgy fruitiness, maybe golden raisin, just this sweet and bright, but still dark fruit note. Of course, that quickly gets taken over by all the intense notes from both the smoking and the chilies. I get, well, first of all, that smokiness, the smokiness is like, to me, it's kind of like wood fire, natural charcoal fire. It's very reminiscent to me of maybe a pizza oven, maybe a smoker, like a smoked meat, like a nice mesquite smoked brisket. That is just an incredible, really good smoke flavor. I don't believe that they smoke their own malts. I think they source them, but whoever they're sourcing them from, I think does a good job. I'm getting a lot of, sometimes in these green chili beers, I get some vegetal notes. I'm really not picking up quite so much vegetal here. What I'm getting is I'm getting more fruitiness, but the fruitiness here is more of, I guess, what I would call a savory fruit or an aromatic fruit. Maybe like sweet onion, maybe? That might be a little bit too much because I'm not really getting that like sharpness that you would get with an onion, but it has that like sweet onion, like root type flavor. I'm getting for sure bell peppers, red pepper, green pepper, orange pepper, that sweet, crisp fruitiness. And then, that's pretty similar to a green chili. I'm getting tomato maybe, like a Roma tomato, kind of like a tomato sauce, leaning still towards that pizza type flavor. I always can't help, I think I said it in the last time I reviewed one of their beers, just chili beer to me, it's like, it tastes like pizza for some reason. And when you add in this smoked flavor, it's just, my brain is like, that's pizza. Am I getting any other note? I mean, let's talk about the spiciness for sure. Spiciness, this is really not that spicy of a beer. I think the last chili beer I reviewed was 2 lager summers ago. I reviewed the Walter's green, the Walter Pueblo Chili Lager or Walter Pueblo Chili Beer, whatever it was called. That beer was spicy. That beer was, I remember how spicy that beer was. It was like you needed another beer to wash down the beer. It was so spicy. The spiciness is very nice, very restrained. It definitely locates itself more on the sides of the tongue, a little bit in the roof of the mouth, but not really. It's really not overwhelming. If you're not really that into spicy food, I think you'd still like this beer. It does have a kick at the end here. I'm just getting this kick, but to me, I like spicy food. I think it's really manageable. So, what do I think of this beer? Do I think it's a lager? To me, it profiles like a lager. I don't like, the thing is that's funny about it is that it's a Rauchmarzen, right? So, I don't think you're gonna have that like sharp crispness that you would get in a lager anyway. So as far as that maybe being lost by using the Kvike yeast and doing the brew at the higher temperature, if it is lost in that process, I don't think you'd be able to tell anyway. So in that sense, I think it really succeeds in that. It's also, I tend to find that the smoked malts, the Rauch beers, to me, tend to have almost this like flat characteristic. Like they just don't have quite as much carbonation. Definitely true for this beer. And I don't think it's a thing with this beer because I know, like, I really like the Schlenkerla. That's usually pretty flat in my mind. It usually doesn't create a voluminous head and have that rich, fizzy mouthfeel that like other lagers would. And same with some other local Rauch beers I've had at other breweries. They just don't really have that mouthfeel. So this beer definitely falls in that category, I would say, where it is very, certainly it's not flat, but it's flatter than a normal beer. And that leads to the mouthfeel. I think that also takes away maybe the natural crispness you would get from a lager. This is a big roundabout way of saying that, like, whatever is lost in substituting the real lagering process with the Kvike yeast, I don't think is really missed too much because of the style of beer. So with that said, like I said, let me know in the comments if you think this is actually a lager and you think I'm cheating on lager summer. Cheers, and have a backcountry beer for me.